I did want to start out talking about a serious medical condition, a medical issue that is infecting our country like no other. And it's crazy. I don't hear commercials about how to solve this medical condition. In fact, as I think about hearing the presidential candidates, neither one of them have talked about their plans to deal with this medical condition that is so serious. I mean, I would guess most people in this room have been affected by the side effects of this medical condition. In fact, if you are a man in here and you are married, you especially know the side effects that this has impacted on your wife. I know some of you are thinking, well, what medical condition are we talking about? We're talking about getting hangry. Anybody know what it means to get hangry? Hangry is this term that means when somebody gets irritable or angry as a result of hunger. And all the men are like, I can't say amen to that because if I do, I'm going to get an elbow, right? Have you seen the side effects of somebody getting hangry? It's a real thing. It is so serious. Hunger leads to all sorts of bad decisions. I mean, we can all agree that. In fact, I told you guys a couple of weeks ago, I was a wrestler in high school. And my freshman year, I wrestled varsity. And I was kind of in between weight classes. And so the decision was you either wrestle up at like 125 pounds, or I had to cut weight and wrestle at like 110 or 112 or whatever the weight class was. And my coach was like, you're going to cut weight. I'm like, I don't want to cut weight. But he's like, you're going to cut weight. And so I wrestled freshman year. I won some matches. I won a tournament. And I qualified for this postseason tournament. And it was going to be a big deal. It was pretty exciting. And so we go to practice Thursday. The tournament is like Friday, Saturday. And I think it was like Wenatchee or Walla. It was somewhere else. We were going to go stay in a hotel. And so Thursday night, we're at practice. And we're weighing in. And coach is like, you better be on weight. And I jump on the scale, and I was like 2.5 pounds overweight. And he's like, Kevin. I was like, all right, Kevin, here's the deal. You cannot eat dinner tonight. He said, here's the deal. If you don't eat dinner tonight, and then you come in tomorrow morning and you weigh in, and you're on weight, you should be able to eat lunch tomorrow. You should be okay, but just don't eat dinner tonight. Okay. I go home, and I was a little bit hungry, I will admit. I get home, and my mom, in her loving care for me, had made no-bake cookies. I had one of them. And I show up the next morning to check my weight. I'm there Friday morning, and I step on the scale, and I am 5.5 pounds overweight. And the coach is like, what'd you do? And I said, well, my mom made no-bake cookies. And he goes, well, how many did you eat? And I said, one whole batch, and some milk and some other stuff went in that. And so literally, I don't know what he did. He got me out of class. He got me out of a couple classes. And what we had to do is I had to wear like every layer of clothing I could find. And he put me in the furnace room at Eisenhower High School, and I had to ride a stationary bike for hours trying to sweat out all that water weight. And then he gave me a cup or a water bottle, and he gave me some hard candy. He's like, just suck on that and keep spitting it out. And so I'm in class spitting, and all these people are like, you're disgusting. And I'm like, I know, it's terrible. And so then, I'm not eating all day long. I'm hungry. And we get on the bus, and we drive to wherever it was. And then they put us in our rooms for the hotel, all right? And again, I'm the skinny guy. And for some reason, they thought it was a good idea to room me with the heavyweight guy, all right? The heavyweight guy, he brings 2 bags into our room. The first bag has all of his gear, and the second bag was literally a bag full of junk food, and he lays it all over the bed. And I'm like, you are a jerk. I slept in the closet that night because I could not handle all of that stuff. It was terrible. So we get ready Saturday morning. We go to the school early in the morning. I jump on the scale, and I make weight right on. Somehow I made weight, right? Now, the way that always worked is you'd weigh in at like 6:30 in the morning, and then the tournament wouldn't start till like 8:30. So we would always go out to breakfast. So we go out to breakfast, and I tell you, I ate everything on my plate. I was like, this is so good. I was so hungry. And then I'm looking, I'm like, hey, you got some eggs left on your plate. Let me finish those for you. There's some hash, I'll finish those hash. I mean, I ate the whole table. I was like a garbage disposal. I mean, I think I even ate the packets of butter because I was so hungry. I'm just eating as much as I can. And so then we get to the tournament. And I think I had a bye that first round because I won a couple matches. And so my first match was against a kid who was good. He had placed in state the year before. He was an upperclassman. And so coach was really excited. He's like, Kevin, this is a chance for us to see like where you are with this guy. And so my first match is against him. I'm wrestling him. And after the first period, I'm beating him. The score was like, I don't know, 7-3. I don't know. Whatever it was, I was beating him. I'm like, this is awesome. Until my stomach started feeling like you ever put like blankets in the washing machine and they all lump to one side. It's like boom, 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 boom. Like my stomach started doing that. And in the second period, I'm in the down position, and he gets me in this move where he just grabs my stomach and just begins to squeeze and squeeze. And I'm doing everything. I'm like, I got to make some room. It's not going to be good. And he squeezes a little bit more, and man, that entire breakfast came up all over him. Like head to toe. Like he was cut. It was terrible. The whole mat, like they did a code brown over the entire school. We're like, we got major cleanup on mat. It was terrible. Can you imagine being the guy that I'm wrestling against? Like, and then the worst part, like I threw up all over the place, and he goes into the shower, and the trainer's making sure I'm fine. And then I walk into the shower too, and I'm like, now I got a shower next to the guy. It was terrible. Yeah. Yeah, we like these stories. No, they disqualified me. And I think it messed up my tournament because I don't think I won a match that entire weekend. But the idea is when you are hungry, it drives you to do all sorts of bad decisions. How many of us have made a bad decision when we were hungry? We don't eat healthy. We eat too much. We don't think clearly. We might get hangry. Hunger is a big deal. But this hunger and the desire to have your stomach satisfied, there's some similarities to a different type of hunger, a hunger of the soul. Most of us would recognize, like deep within us, in our soul, there's this craving, this longing to be satisfied, this longing to find peace for our soul and value. And we search for all sorts of ways to find that satisfaction, right? We search for all sorts of things. Like what is it for you? In the 1930s, the most famous author was a guy by the name of William Somerset. He was a novelist and a playwright, wrote a bunch of stuff, was very, very, very famous in the 1930s, very successful. And there's a story where in the 1960s, Somerset is at the end of his life, and his nephew is like, man, I don't know how long Uncle's going to live. I want to go spend some time with Uncle. And so at that point, Somerset, his plays, thousands of people had done them. And so the royalties kept coming in. He was incredibly wealthy. He was incredibly famous. People would constantly write him 300 letters a week that he'd get, people saying, hey, we want to know all about you, because, again, they didn't have social media like we do nowadays. So that's what you did. You wrote letters to the famous people. Somerset lived in this fabulous villa on the Mediterranean Sea. Like, all accounts, like, he had a pretty great life. He was pretty successful. And when his nephew gets to visit, he says, I walk in the house, and Somerset is sitting in the recliner, and he's got a Bible open up, and he's like, my uncle was not religious. He's got the Bible open up, and he keeps reading this verse that says, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world but forfeit his soul? Repeating it again and again and again. And his nephew's like, hey, uncle, like, you are one of the most famous writers alive. Like, that's got to mean something for your life, right? And his response was, according to his nephew, I wish I'd never written a single word. It has brought me nothing but misery. Everyone who really knew me hated me. That my life is a failure, and it's too late for me to change. And then his nephew said, Somerset began to look off into the distance, looked down to the floor, wasn't making eye contact. And he said, I'm not ready. I'm not ready to die. I'm not ready to die yet. You know, this is one of the most famous people in his generation that had everything that we would ascribe for: wealth, fame, success. But when the time came for reckoning, Somerset found his life empty, worthless, not satisfying. And he was afraid to die. I think the question is that what life is destined to be for us? We started a series here last week, not a couple weeks ago. We started a series last week called I Am, where we are looking at statements that Jesus made in the Gospel of John, mimicking the statement that God made in Exodus chapter 3. And this is significant when Jesus makes these I am statements, because when Jesus says I am, he is telling the people, I am God. Like sometimes people think, oh, Jesus was he's a great teacher. You know, he was a good example for me to follow. That's all he was. No, Jesus actually made the statement, I am God. Like, we need to understand that he wasn't just claiming to be a good teacher or a good person. He was claiming to be God. But beyond that, as he makes these I am statements, he applies these statements to areas of humanity's greatest brokenness and greatest need. Longings that we have within our heart. In reality, by claiming to be God, he is claiming that those cravings that we have, those longings we have in our deep within us, he is the missing piece. He is the one that will solve those things. Today, we're looking at the first of the I am statements. It comes from John chapter 6 that Gary read for us. And Jesus says, I am the bread of life. And again, that's why we're talking about hunger today. Because when we start thinking about the deep hunger within our souls, the hunger for meaning and purpose and contentment and satisfaction, those things will only be satisfied with a relationship with God. Now, what's fascinating about John chapter 6 is before Jesus makes a statement, I am the bread of life, we get the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000. And if you're not familiar with the story, Jesus, in part because he did all these miracles, he attracted crowds of people. All people wanted to come. They wanted, hey, maybe you'll do one of those miracles for us. Maybe we'll learn something from him. And all these people are attracted to him. And there's over 5,000 people there that day. And he asked his disciples, hey, guys, they're hungry. Can you guys feed them? And one of his disciples, he's like, you know how many 5,000 people are? We couldn't feed them bread even if we had 200 denarii worth of bread. I love when the Bible has those denarii terms. Like, what does that mean? It's like 8 months of wages, right? You think about your salary for 8 months. If you could buy enough bread with 8 months, these disciples are like, we still don't have enough bread to feed all these people. Then one of the other disciples says, I can't imagine being this disciple. He's like, well, we don't have enough bread, but there is a little boy with a Lunchable. He's got 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. And Jesus is like, all right, bring it to me. And Jesus takes the two fish and the 5 loaves of bread, and he takes it and he blesses it, starts breaking it up and starts distributing amongst the people. And the bread and the fish are multiplying. They can't give it out fast enough. In fact, they feed every one of those people till they are full, till they are satisfied. Not as full as I was when I was wrestling, but they ate till they were full and satisfied. And afterwards, they collected 12 baskets of leftovers. And the people are like, wow, you are the prophet. You are the Messiah. You're the one that we've been waiting for. And I'm like, yeah, I'd say the same thing. Like, you're going to feed me like that? Absolutely. So at the end of the day, Jesus says, hey, it's been a long day. Disciples, you guys take a boat, go to the other side of the lake. I'm going to hang out here for a while. And then the storm happens on the water. So Jesus walks out on the water, calms the storm, goes to the other side with the disciples. Well, our text picks up where all the crowds, they're waking up the next day and they're like, hey, where's Jesus? Like he was on this side of the lake and the disciples went away, but where's he at now? Again, like they were like, man, that was a good meal yesterday, and I'm hungry again today. Maybe he'll do the same thing. And they find him, and Jesus ignores their questions. How did you get here? Verse 26, this is what Jesus said to the crowds when they find him. He says, I truly say to you, you are seeking me not because you saw signs, but because you ate your fill of the loaves. He says, the only reason you're seeking me is because you were hangry, and I gave you Long John Silver. I gave you Red Lobster. I gave you fish and bread, and now you're just coming because you want me to feed you again. The people were material motivated, right? We want you to do what you did for us yesterday, and sometimes that's the way we view God. We're like, God, can you just put a white beard on and a red hat, put some elves with you, and then you can just give us whatever we want, right? We kind of think that's the way, that's the way the people are looking at Jesus. Hey, we like what you did for us yesterday. Can you give us another gift? Now, if we're going to be honest, there are some of us, we first came to church because we were hoping to get something from God. We needed help. We needed help. We needed a job. We needed help with our marriage. We needed help with our kids. We couldn't have kids. We wanted kids. We came to God. Can you help us with this? We needed friends. We needed a miracle in our health. We needed something. And that's good and right. Like we came today, and we're pleading on Zach's behalf that God would heal him. You see, Jesus isn't insensitive to those needs. In fact, the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000 shows, man, he's not insensitive to our needs and our wants. He cares about those things. He cares about cancer and kids and marriage and job and financial struggles. But for Jesus, he recognized what we need most is not the miracle. What we need most is not the creation. What we need most is the maker of the miracle or the creator itself. I mean, you think about this. It would be foolish. It'd be foolish for us to settle on the creation when we could have the creator. It'd be foolish to settle on the miracle when we could have the miracle maker. I mean, it would be like, hey, we go to a fancy restaurant and we settle on the appetizer while there's so much more in front of us that we would just, I just want the appetizer. It's never meant to satisfy our soul. These things that God does for us are meant to point us to the Creator, to the maker of the miracle. So they come to Jesus, and they're like, hey, and Jesus is like, the only reason you're seeking me is because I filled your belly yesterday. In verse 27, here's what he says next. He says, do not work for food that perishes, but work for the food that endures for eternal life, which the Son of Man will give. See, again, the people, they're just thinking physically. They're just thinking, man, if we could just get this physical filling, man, we'll be happy, bread for today. And Jesus says the problem with that is that bread's going to perish. Kind of like you go to the store and there's all those expiration dates on all the food that we buy. It's like that filling has an expiration date on it. What you need is bread that lasts for eternity. And this is where Jesus is shifting the conversation a little bit. He's not talking about just a physical feeling. He's not talking about filling your belly. He's talking metaphorically. He's talking about the hunger within our soul, that craving inside of us. And that bread is not temporary. We need a bread that lasts for eternity. See, oftentimes, we don't think beyond the immediate. We don't think beyond the physical needs. And Jesus is saying you have a greater need. The craving deep within your soul is beyond the food and it's beyond the belly. This is a craving that, if we're going to be all honest, we all know and recognize. We long for purpose, for meaning, for satisfaction, for peace. If we're going to be honest, how many of us have searched and searched and searched in many different ways to find peace and satisfaction and contentment? We do all sorts of things. In fact, we live in a consumer society that has sophisticated advertising meant to appeal to that very need of ours to be satisfied, to be content, to be fulfilled, to be whatever it happens to be, right? I mean, the ads, you watch TV and they're like, hey, if you just get this car, if you just wear this cologne, man, your self-image will be completely healed. And you will be so confident in yourself. You know, social media, we go on social media and it's like, man, if I could just be beautiful enough, if I could just be popular enough, if I just had enough likes and enough followers, man, then I would be at peace. I mean, if I could just have enough money, enough power, if I could just have enough of that, then I'd be fully content and everything would be right in my heart and in my life. I mean, if we're going to be honest, religion plays into this same exact thing. If I just am good enough, if I just follow the rules, then I'll be at peace, right? We turn to meditation, to philosophy, to knowledge, thinking if I can just pursue this enough, it'll satisfy the craving of my soul. And there's this promise that if we do these things, they will satisfy us. But if we're going to be honest, how many of us have been through that? Like, man, I sought that thing. I sought that thing. And it was kind of like just getting my belly full. It was good for a moment. But then the next day I woke up and I needed another one. I needed more. It wasn't enough. It wasn't an eternal satisfaction. It was a temporary satisfaction. That's where it almost becomes like a drug. That whatever it is, we seek after it. But there's always another fix coming. There's always another desire for something else. In fact, like my story, like I'm a product of the Washington State foster system. My biological parents had their addictions and their issues, and they gave me and my two sisters up for adoption. They just gave us over to the state. We were adopted into a family that loved us, and then Dad died in the living room watching The Price is Right with us when I was 9 years old. And if I'm going to be honest with you, like there's this deep longing within me. There's a craving for acceptance. There's a craving to say you're wanted, you're loved, you're approved of, you are enough. And I'll be honest, like I've spent majority of my life being a people pleaser. Because if I can just make people happy, it's kind of like the bread and the fish that Jesus gave the 5,000. And that satisfies me until the next day when I need to find it again. The craving is back. This is what Somerset realized. He spent his entire life searching for satisfaction. And if he's going to be honest, it left him hungry for more. And this is what Jesus is telling us. Don't work for bread that's going to perish. It's temporary. We need a bread that endures for eternity, that will truly satisfy our soul, that'll give us that satisfaction, that filling, that peace that we long for. But as often is the case, as Jesus is trying to teach these people this thing, they just don't get it. They don't realize that Jesus isn't talking about physical bread. And so they say, verse 30, Jesus, what sign are you going to do that we may see and believe in you? You know, what work are you going to perform? Our fathers, they ate manna in the wilderness, and it was written that he will give them bread from heaven to eat. You're like, come on, Jesus. Remember what Moses did. As Moses was leading the Israelites out of Egypt into the promised land, Moses got manna to come down from heaven. He fed the people 6 days a week for 40 years with this special heavenly sent bread. And they're like, Jesus, what are you going to do? I mean, your miracle yesterday was great. You know, we love the Red Lobster. But Jesus, what about doing some Chick-fil-A for us now, right? What about some steak and taters? I know some of you are like, gross. What about some kale salad for some of you? Is that better, right? Like, Jesus, we love what you did, And we think you're the guy, and if Moses did like 40 years, what can you do for us? Can you feed us more every day? Is that the eternal bread you're talking about? Jesus said this, verse 32. Jesus said to them, it's not Moses who gave the bread from heaven, but it's our Father who gives the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. Jesus is correcting them. He said, let's be clear. It wasn't Moses who gave the people bread. It wasn't Moses who gave the people manna. It was God. It was God. And this is where he's saying, hey, don't get lost in worshiping the creation. Don't get lost in worshiping the manna. Worship the one who gave it. Worship the Creator. But the people aren't getting it. They're just not getting it. And he says the bread of God is actually a person who comes down from heaven and gives his life to the world. And then they're like, okay, sir, Jesus, you're saying all this. You're talking about this bread that satisfies eternally. Give us this bread always. In verse 35, Jesus said to them, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall not thirst. And I want to clarify something here. Jesus didn't say, I'm going to give you the bread of life. He didn't say, let me teach you how to make the bread of life that will last forever. No, Jesus said, I am the bread of life. I am what you crave. I am what will fill the longings in your heart. I am what will satisfy that hole within inside of you. See, these longings deep within our soul for purpose and satisfaction and peace, the things that, if we're going to be honest, we search in a lot of different ways to have fulfilled. Jesus says, I'm the one. I am the one you crave. That the hole inside your heart, the thing that you've been trying to fill with wealth or popularity or sex or relationship or power or whatever it happens to be, that thing that you've been trying to fill, it's a God-sized hole, and I'm the one who can fill it. And let me tell you what, when we understand this, it is so transforming. Because here's what it means for us. Like the best vacation I went on, we went to a beach in Mexico. That was amazing. I love sitting in the sand with the warm water. But guess what? When that vacation ended, I was sad. I wanted another one. You think about the fanciest meal that you've ever had, kale salad or whatever it happens to be. Guess what happens the next day? That food has passed through you, and you want another one. You might have the coolest clothes and the sweetest car and the brand new phone, but guess what? There's a new model coming out next year. I mean, this is where you talk to people, and they're like, man, I've worked my entire life. I'm approaching retirement, and I'm scared to retire. Why? Because their career gave them meaning, and you take that away, I don't know what to do with myself. I don't know who I am anymore. I mean, I'll say this in marriage. Like my wife, she's not in here today, I can say this. My wife is the greatest gift that God has given me besides salvation. Like, I don't know how I got so lucky. But honest to God, as great as she is, she can't fulfill the deep longings of my heart. She can't be that. She was never created to fill that hole within me. She's incapable. In fact, there's a story of Tom Brady. Tom Brady had won like 3 Super Bowls. This was a long time ago because he's got like 7 of them now. 6, I don't know how many he's got. Tom Brady had won 3 Super Bowls. And they did an interview with him on 60 Minutes to talk about his success. And this is what Tom Brady said. Why do I have 3 Super Bowl rings and still think there's something greater out there for me? A lot of people tell me this is what it is. You've reached your goal. You've reached your dream. Your life is complete. And I think God has got to be more than this. I mean, this can't be all it's cracked out to be. And this is where, as we come in today and we're like, God, what do you have for us? This is what Jesus is saying to us. He says, I am the bread of life. That longing, that satisfaction, that filling, that completeness, Jesus says, I am the bread of life. In fact, here's our summary for this passage for us this morning, is that it's a relationship with God that is the only thing that can truly satisfy the deep hunger within our souls. That deep hunger that we feel, we spend our entire life searching for. The only thing that will truly satisfy us. Not more knowledge, not more money, not being a good person, not another fix, not another relationship. The only thing that will satisfy that longing inside of us is a relationship with God. It means as we grasp, we shouldn't be grasping for just more creation or another miracle. No, we should be grasping to know the creator and maker of miracles, because I tell you what, that changes everything when you know him. When we understand that Jesus is the bread of life, that he's the one that's going to satisfy us, he changes everything. Because when good things happen, listen, it's awesome when good things happen. A plate of no-bake cookies is a good thing. It's an amazing thing. But that plate's going to get empty. And I'm going to keep chasing for more cookies. But when our satisfaction is in God, when we have this assurance that we are loved and accepted by him, you know what that means? That I can celebrate the no-bake cookies. I can celebrate the win. I can celebrate the good thing, but it doesn't define me, because I'm already defined by God. You know what else that means? That when we fail, it happens. Every one of us, it happens. We struggle, we make a mess, we screw things up. If we understand our satisfaction comes from God, we don't have to be despondent when things fall apart. Doesn't mean we're not disappointed. But when we go through that failure, the relationship breakup, when we don't get into the school, we don't make the team, when we lose the job, our soul is not truly devastated, because the failure does not define who we are. God does. God does. This is where our satisfaction, our confidence, our assurance doesn't come from what's good in our life or what's bad. It comes from the fact that God is with us. Psalm 23, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Why? Because God is with me. And this is where sometimes we get into church. We show up in church and they're like, hey, here's our religious platitude. You just need to be satisfied in God. Just be happy in God. What does that actually mean? What does it mean for us to be satisfied in God? Kind of sounds like spiritual mumbo jumbo, where we just hold hands and sing kumbaya, think pious thoughts. No, here's what it means for us to be satisfied in God. It means we have this absolute assurance that we belong to him and he belongs to us. We have this absolute assurance, no matter what goes on, no matter if things are good or if things are bad, we have this assurance that I belong to the Creator. Not the creation, I belong to the Creator, the giver of miracles. And he belongs to me. And guess what? When we grasp that, that literally will change everything for us. In fact, we talked about last week when God said, I am, and how that gave Moses tremendous confidence. Because when I am not, God still is. The bread of life, Jesus being the bread of life, gives us a whole different confidence. You see, I saw a preview, a week or two ago, for The Lion King, the live-action movie. Anybody seen the preview for that? I loved Lion King growing up. It was such a good movie. In fact, I think about young Simba singing, I just can't wait to be king. Like, isn't that what Prince William does every day? Sings that song, just can't wait. Royal family joke there. There we go. You know, I love the picture of young Simba, right? Because Simba knows who he is. He's a future king. He knows it. And maybe more importantly, Simba knows whose he is. He is the apple of his father's eye. He is Mufasa's son. And this young lion, even when he's in trouble, he trusts, my dad's going to take care of me. My dad's got this. My dad is with me. He knows what's best for me. And when he has good times, man, he can enjoy those times with his father. You know, a sense in the beginning of that movie, Simba is so free, satisfied, because he knows, I belong to Mufasa. Mufasa belongs to me. And of course, you know, as the movie goes along, Scar comes along. Mufasa dies at the paws of Uncle Scar. And what happens next is Simba begins to struggle. Until years later, Simba remembers whose he is. I'm still Mufasa's. Mufasa is still mine. You see, this is a great thing about the bread of life. We're not talking about the Lion King. The bread of life is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He's the creator of the universe, the maker of miracles, the giver of life. He is the name above every name. And when we take that bread, when we take that relationship with him, this is what he says. He says, you are mine. You are my child. You are my son. You are my daughter. And there is nothing greater than that. Because when we go through good times, when we have the good plate of cookies, we have the good meal, we celebrate, God, you're so good. I'm so glad you gave this to me. It was so wonderful. But I'm not defined by it because I know you are still with me. And when I go through hard things, guess what? They don't destroy me because I know I still belong to you. I know you are still working things out for my good and for your glory. This is so significant for us to understand that he is the bread of life. He satisfies that hunger within us. You know how we get this? I skipped over. We'll just read this, and then we're done. Verse 28, they said to him, what must we do to be doing the works of God? How do we get it? How do we get the bread of life? Jesus says in verse 29, this is the work of God, that you believe in him whom he sent. Which means I don't have a bunch of things for you to do today. I'm not telling you to be religious. I'm not telling you to fix up your life. I'm asking you to believe in him. John 1:12, to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Pray with me.